So we would like to start without further ado with the keynote speaker, Agamemnon Otero, the founding director of Energy Garden, Repowering London and Brixton Energy. And in 2016, Agamemnon was named one of the 50 most impactful leaders globally by CSR Congress. So Agamemnon, we're very pleased to have you with us here today. And just maybe before I start with my question, I would like to ask, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from London, and it is beautiful and sunny. And I hope that we can share that light with everybody who is not having that sun and warmth right now.
That's lovely. So we would love to know more about the Energy Garden and its joint environmental and social impacts. Could you tell us your opinion on the also replicability of this model in other cities and regions? And this way also set the ground for the panel discussion.
Absolutely. I would be honored. I'm going to share my screen. And if you can see that. How's that?
Yeah, working fine.
Great. And that's a full set, yes?
Yep.
Brilliant. So as I sit here in London and I'm reaching out to all of you, I wish that we could be in person, but the closest thing I can do with you today is share some imagery and some of the stories that we have been so fortunate to be able to address. And I think one of the major ones has been that this is a journey, that the community movement is in transition, and we are trying to address the systemic issues that face us, which are basically that fiduciary responsibility. The purpose of business is to have the highest financial return in the shortest amount of time, is negatively impacting our health and well-being. And we need to come together to do that. So as a social entrepreneur and collaborator and co-worker, we created many different organizations in the UK over the last 11 years to help to work through that, from as a practitioner in Brixton to developing very specifically on social housing, to developing repowering to help facilitate that on further social housing blocks, to then work on policy, so founding Community Energy England with others, and then really focusing in on a scalable model, which really tries to address that, which is Energy Garden. So that really means, in the sense of how do we empower people? How do we enable that? What is the engine that drives it? Is what we call community-owned renewable energy, or core projects. Something that allows communities to come together and work in two forms, both renewable energy and then people power. And that resilience of empowered communities allows people to then take on what seems to be a system which is out of control. That is, I wouldn't say there are people particularly in power who are to blame for this current situation. I would say that the system itself was very extractive, and therefore the waste has impacted our communities. And we can stop it, because there are people in businesses all the way to the tops of organizations which are shaping the way we do things, that are keen and want to help facilitate this. So when we talk about community-owned renewable energy, people might think, okay, social housing estates in Islington or Brixton or Croydon or somewhere in the urban area, Berlin, wherever the city is for you, and there's these buildings that put solar panels on the rooftop. That is not what community energy is, nor I think what we alone, but it's the beginning. What it really is it looks like this: people coming together in a democratic format to decide how their future will be spent, both their financial return, their environmental impulses and influences, and the way that the actual social dynamics can be facilitated, so that governance for future generations of people, but also the planet, are facilitated. And I always try to explain that all the projects have been a collaborative process. And in the bottom right picture right here of this slide is a woman called Anne Kanai, who was the founding director of one of the cooperatives which we helped to set up across London. And she is a matriarch, and a lot of the projects hinge on these incredibly powerful women in each community. Someone who's moved into their past their 40s, in their mid 80s, and they have really helped to facilitate these dynamic relationships. And like a tree in that community, they help to facilitate that dynamic movement of nutrients from one area to the others. And the community groups are almost the mushrooms, the mycological movement that then uses the xylem and phloem to move that energy and move that nutrients. Myself, I had cancer twice. I studied math and medicine to be able to try to facilitate that dynamic change. But it was even those grandmothers in my own life, like my grandmother and my great grandmother, who helped to facilitate those relationships and really, for me, ground out the idea that the community can be held by members and that all the knowledge lives there already. So, the systemic issue that we're facing in the UK right now is that the transport industry is the largest emitter of emissions. That London, the big sort of engine of the UK economy, something about 37% of the UK's GDP, is consuming huge amounts of energy, and it's moving 2.4 billion passenger journeys around. And there are hundreds of billions per quarter of investments going into environmental social governance projects, but they are really only using a little bit of environment, saying, oh, we're putting in renewables. But that is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is rethink how we see the city in these grand corridors of metal and concrete, and trying to transform them into a robust space where we can empower communities to regenerate London. And we're doing that by taking people from seed to solar and directly addressing the carbon emissions by allowing people to invest in renewables on big infrastructure. And then we've developed 30 gardens, have about 300 active volunteers across the city, across 14 local authorities. We have paid accredited youth training programs, schools programs, and in that, we then can facilitate a dynamic conversation with the business sector and say to them, look, you talk about ESG, you talk about being involved, but let's move away from philanthropic giving, from far away with sort of a hands-off movement, to becoming a one vote, one shareholding member in our large 10 plus megawatt cooperative. So we're looking to build 100 megawatts in London now to help facilitate that dynamic relationship. And it really starts on each one of the platforms. So you talk about social media platforms. This is being broadcast live across Facebook. Well, the true platform are these interconnectors between the city's infrastructure, where people can have this dynamic conversation around food, around health, around air quality, around biodiversity, and around energy, the fundamental pillars. But how do we do that? Through education. So we might put in a green wall and bug huts and bat nests and swift nests, but the truth of the matter is that it's through consultation that we can then explore where people are and what people want to do, have young people coming together. We have a paid accredited youth training programs that bring those people in, and they learn about finance, IT, technical, legal, media, and marketing, of setting up and owning their own energy system and being a part of a power structure where they are not just electrically powered in their homes, but empowered to deliver the social change. And that really starts with voting for what they want and helping facilitate that. It means being artistic and creative to help facilitate that. And finally, it means installing those solar panels on the buildings and really being embedded into these communities. And we talk about, these youths who are disenfranchised and all the violence. And actually what they want is a way into society. They don't want a way out of where they live. They want a way in. And that enables them by giving them the right to choose what food they want to eat, how they want to celebrate, how we can come together as a team and do that. And that really means not just, how do we talk to the community, but it means involving the whole entire community, from the business to the social, to the non-governmental, to the governmental bodies, and working through a structured program between strategic content, resource planning with the state and the government, and then engaging with the people to have a co-production process. We talk now about citizens' assemblies, but that's what we've been doing for 15 years, of citizens' assemblies, and then fulfilling that by actually making it action through energy. So that's fuel poverty, that's food poverty, and directly addressing the heat or eat dilemma in building a renewable energy cooperative, so that people come together and they can then pay for the social and environmental outcomes, and we can measure those so that we can create a virtuous circle. And that virtuous circle can be broken down in this way, but it can also be broken down into your hardcore business financials and making a strong business case to the financial community that literally has to break people down into a very clear narrative for the financial returns, but also you have to do it in this ESG narrative. We have to be clear about how the environmental and social elements are deliverable and the equation into the financial community so that they can say, yes, this tree, these communities are being empowered, it costs this much, and therefore it can be facilitated. And that dynamic relationship on policy has been over the years. It's really been over the last 10 years. And I think it's very important to communicate to you all that this is a transition, and we are having to be iterative, both by asking community how to be involved and asking you to get involved today, but also how can we all be involved to help facilitate that. And so Energy Garden has been for me, a long process of working alongside policymakers, large business, to get them to sign off on that. And how it works is that basically we come together, agree that scope, and help them to implement those things. And that is that piece around monitoring evaluation for our community, for the business community, is so vital for the community energy movement and the social enterprises so that we can repeat and scale. And I think that's what growing home looks like for our urban environments. If we come together in that way and we facilitate it with the financial engine of energy infrastructure, we can then prove the environmental and the social outcomes and create the home that we want to live in. And that is it for me. And I think I'm 1 minute over.